The murder of George Floyd, apart from sending shockwaves throughout the world, also served as a catalyst for Western countries with a checkered past of racial injustice to confront its own oppression. It has become a critical inflection point, if you will, to contend with a lot of the unresolved and deeply entrenched issues of racism in their societies. American writer Jelani Cobb describes this moment as an American spring of reckoning. Still, this reckoning extends to every nation that has had and continues to grapple with the legacy of racial injustice. Today I want us to reflect on our own legacy of racism in the Caribbean, and in particular Grenada. The starting point would be August 1st, 1834. It was the date in which the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 took effect in most British colonies, freeing the more than 800,000 enslaved Africans in Grenada and in other Caribbean countries, as well as in Canada and South Africa respectively. While the Africans were granted their manumission or freedom papers, their white owners were compensated for each kidnapped and enslaved African under the Slave Compensation Act of 1837, which was required by British law. In the case of Grenada, a total of £570,733 were paid to the slave-owning planter class for the 19,009 slaves held on the island at the time of emancipation. After adjusting this amount using Britain's Office for National Statistics CPI calculator, this amounts to £64,320,103.76 in 2020, or put another way, $214,709,939 East Caribbean dollars. The Grenadian slaveholding class wasn't exactly benevolent kidnappers. In a slave narrative edited by Jane Harris in October 2017, two brothers, Emile and Lucien, who were runaway slaves that fled to Martinique, recalled the punishment meted out by Dr. Joshua Bryant, a physician and slave master who resided on the Carenage in the late 1700s. Dr. Bryant owned about half a dozen slaves. The brothers recalled one of the punishments he meted out to a black male slave by the name of Marshall under his supervision. Quote, "First they tied him up in the bilboes, trussing his head so he couldn't move. Then they forced an older man to excrement in his mouth, after which they gagged Marshall for 5 hours and wired his mouth shut. Once they make you do that, you are broken," unquote. The author who interviewed this runaway slave then goes on to ask, why was he punished? And Emile replied, quote, "For eating leftovers in the hospital kitchen. He killed himself a few weeks later," unquote. So while the African descendants continue to live with the intergenerational trauma of slavery, and while some in the respectability politics class in the Caribbean rubbish the idea of reparations, the European descendants continue to benefit from the spoils of emancipation and slavery. The list of beneficiaries is long. The Church of England, the Bank of England, Barclays Bank PLC, HSBC, Lloyds of London, Glasgow University, the Royal Bank of Scotland, and Smith, Payne and Smith Bank. So Hilary Beckles said in 2016, quote, "Reparation is not just an issue of repaying the enormous debts owed to the descendants of enslaved Africans. Reparation is part and parcel of the global movements for racial justice, for social justice and economic justice. It occupies a crucial space in the movement against growing income and wealth inequalities in the world," unquote.
They were not brought across the Atlantic for show to dance and sing. They were brought here for economic purposes, economic reasons, and we have to feel the sense of that, because unless you understand the economics of this matter, you will misunderstand the future.
And while CARICOM set up a reparations commission in 2013, now might be a good time to revisit its remit, to ensure that there is the political will to pursue this perennial cause in a strategic and calculated manner. May we seek reparations with the same passion and zeal that we use to welcome members of the royal family whenever they visit their former colonial playgrounds. Finally, reparations must not be viewed as a crude attempt to extort money, as some in the white British establishment have advanced. It should be considered to be a powerful appeal in correcting the historic injustices of a system that enriched the British Empire for centuries.